Very much. Let me move on to the next point here. I'm going to ask Clive Neal to come up. Basically, Larry Taylor, as Clive mentioned earlier, is in the hospital. He's get an update from Clive here, hopefully. And secondly, we're going to try to dedicate this this portion of the meeting here to what Larry would know and love, which is he's still around, don't get me wrong. But that is a discussion of how we get humans back to the moon. So let me turn it over to Clive. Clive?
Thank you. As I said on Tuesday, I am not Larry Taylor. And no, not yet. Okay, fair enough. I'm working on it, all right. Larry is back in Knoxville. He was discharged from the hospital yesterday morning and flew back yesterday afternoon and is at home resting. He's actually following doctor's orders, so he may be sicker than we thought. But he did try to leave the hospital going through 2 security guards on Wednesday, but on Tuesday, but he's gotten over that now. But he's doing fine, and we hope he'll be back to his usual self in the not too distant future. But wanted to use this time a little bit. We had a discussion yesterday. There were several presentations about the Deep Space Gateway in order to get humans at least close to the moon, and potentially with either robotic or human landers to be going back and forth to the surface of the moon. You may have seen my name on that Science Organizing Committee, and felt that this may be a chance to get some input from the community as to how best to utilize that facility in terms of getting science done. There's been lots of instruments proposed to be on there to do everything from astrophysics, heliophysics, some lunar science, but also the biomedical aspect. But here, focusing on the moon, I would like to sort of start a discussion for needs that would facilitate lunar science that could be on the Deep Space Gateway. And he's not a plant, all right. James.
I'd like to just say a few words. I tried to get this point made yesterday, but I think one of the things that the Gateway absolutely needs to do in inviting the scientific community to be engaged in this is to think about the details of what we all want to do, which is to go to the surface of the moon with humans. And I was a little, quite frankly, appalled at the pushback I got to that. It just seems to me that if we're going through this exercise, we really need to talk about that as a contingency. You know, I appreciate that there are aspects of the programmatics that maybe aren't, you know, maybe it's impolitic to say one thing or another at this point, but I really hope that when this workshop is organized, that we can find a way to help NASA provide the contingency plans, either for foreign partners or other people, that illustrates the real excitement that, in fact, going back to the moon entails, and the fundamental science that we can be doing there with all the data we've had, and how that gateway can facilitate human exploration of the surface of the moon. So, you know, I think this is a great opportunity, and I hope our colleagues at Marshall and NASA headquarters can find a way to really engage that part of the conversation and make it a plus.
Yeah. I just, when I heard you make the comment and heard the answer about, you know, no human related exploration from the Gateway, I got the feeling that was a political decision, not technical. And the logical other question is, would you use the Gateway for a robotic lander? Was there any benefit if you were to use that as a staging point? And there's probably not a delta V benefit, but there might be other benefits of being able to check something out, make sure that it's okay before you land, use other propulsion to get there versus high thrust, you know, for landing. So I mean, I don't know if that's, you know, the answer that I heard. I forget who it was that said, you know, humans is out of this part of the discussion, but does it make sense to make that a base for robotic landing up and down as opposed to human landing.
Well, I think somebody told me one time, you better not ask a lawyer a question before you know the answer. And I'm just thinking that if NASA asks, what can you do with sort of like low latency robotic exploration of the moon, the answer could be not as positive as one might hope. So you don't want to be put in that position. That's why I think this idea of like, call it what you want politically, call it a contingency, call it opportunities for foreign participants. Good grief, if anything, we've worked over the years trying to get back to the moon. We have enough viewgrass around, and I'm sure there's some somewhere that say that, okay? So the point is, it would really be great to change the conversation from what I heard yesterday from Ben Bussey and others. Maybe it is a political statement, but we have to be creative here because we have to be able to provide the information that either NASA, should the political situation change, or some other agency, JAXA or whoever is going to be doing it. So I guess I just make a plea for how we formulate this in a way that embraces that but doesn't exclude it. I mean, surely we're creative enough to do that, to get over any political hurdles.
So, Jim, I mean, this is an issue that's not new. I mean, for 5 or 6 years, people supported by NLSI and then Survey have been investigating exactly this issue. So there have been studies of lunar sample return missions that involve the Orion vehicle alone. So the samples are collected on the far side. There's an ascent vehicle. They go to Orion, and then Orion is the return capsule and bring the samples, and then that has been expanded into using the Gateway as a depot for landers and ascent vehicles. In fact, through ISEG, or in support of the ISEG architecture, ESA led a trade study for a 4-year, 4 lunar sample return mission concept called Heracles, and we did the landing site and traverse studies for that. And again, the idea is that samples are collected on the far side. There is an ascent vehicle, a reusable ascent vehicle that returns that material to the Gateway. At that time, it was simply called the EDISH, the Exploration Deep Space Habitat. And then again, crew would take those samples back on the Orion. So you don't have to build an additional robotic return sample capsule. And so if you have the capability to have crew in a position above the far side, whether it be in Orion and or the Gateway, you can facilitate a lot of lunar sample return capability. And we're not talking about the 1 kilogram sample that NOAA was speaking about. We actually did crank the numbers, and we may be talking about 60 kilograms of rock coming back through those robotic efforts.
That's great, and that's all the kinds of things that should be done by this sort of thing. And there's a lot of groundwork from the work you've done and that others in the Survey situation. And one of the beauties to me about this is exactly what Survey ought to be doing. But I'm reminded that in Apollo, okay, we did not go to the moon for science. There is no way that we could have justified Apollo on the basis of science alone. Period. Okay, but we're going to the moon in Apollo, so. A lot of people worked very hard to make the robust science return we got back a reality. So no question, if we're going to go for other reasons, we damn well better be there to take advantage of that. But I'm talking about something larger here, which is we cannot sit there and ignore facilitating human exploration to the surface. Because we can do that. We did that, didn't we? Yeah, we did that. Okay. So, we can't be shut out of, we can't be for political reasons shut out of a discussion that needs to take place. Call it what you will. Call it contingency planning. I just, I think we have to engage that.
Yeah, I just want to offer, I guess, 2 thoughts that are kind of unrelated to each other. The first has to do with your fundamental topic, which is use of the Gateway. And what I read in the pushback you felt yesterday was merely an artifact of current uncertainty in transition. Mm-hmm. I don't think anybody who said anything was intending to be negative about it. It's just there's a hugely uncertain environment within the agency now. We don't even have an administrator, and nobody knows how to spell the word moon right, et cetera. So that will resolve over time, and you guys know that, because I take a programmatic view of these things, you know that I have predicted for many years that inevitably the human side of NASA will come back to the moon because it's the only practical thing that they can afford to do. So I'm hopeful about all that, and I think, like Dave's talking about, the being able to return enormous quantities, scientifically enormous quantities of sample, will be transformational. But the other thought I wanted to suggest is that we not, in our road mapping, I think we should be clear that there's you could call it a tier of investigations that are enabled by human activity, and I think we do need to continue developing that. But there's another tier which will be enabled by another transformation, and that is one company's going to win the Google Lunar X Prize, or close to it, and there are 3 or maybe 4, maybe all 5 teams are going to have that capability. They're not going to stop until they've landed and operated. And when that's demonstrated, that itself will be transformational for our ability to access multiple sites across the globe of the moon to do a kind of diversity of exploration that we can't actually think about doing with humans. It's an orthogonal type of exploration, scientific exploration, that I think will be as transformational. So I just want to encourage us not to forget that tier as well, because as soon as those guys land on the moon, people are going to wake up and say, oh my God, it has a capital M.
Yeah. Okay, so just let me respond to that real quickly here. I think you're absolutely right, and this is the kind of discussion that I hope that the workshops, will include and facilitate, et cetera. But still, no one is talking about humans on the moon. We're talking about, your point is transformational, no question about that, but that's off in another direction. Maybe the time has passed for humans to do exploration of the surface of the moon. Maybe technology is such that it's irrelevant now. That case can probably be made. Let's discuss that, okay? Okay, well then let's discuss that. Okay, good point. So my point is to the young people in the audience. We talked on Tuesday, or was it Wednesday, whatever, the panel discussion with Jack Schmidt and others, about where the opportunities are. What are you going to do? Okay, so what you're hearing here is a good example of NASA at its best, which is future planning, et cetera, but it's often governed by technological and essentially political aspects, okay? So I encourage you to figure out a way to get to be part of this discussion and make your dreams a reality. If you want to go to the moon, get your butt to that meeting and talk to these people here and make it a reality, because you can see right now it's not going to be a reality because it's not going to be discussed, okay? So that's a challenge to you.
So, okay, so human exploration, or humans to the surface, are in the discussion at one level, and it's at the ISEG level. So if you look at the last version of the roadmap, the ISEG roadmap, which NASA is a signer of, there is humans to the lunar surface. It's circa 2028. It's now being examined as 2030 to 2035. There is an IAC paper, also co-signed by NASA, that lays out these 5 humans to the surface lunar missions. And I spoke a little bit about how the LER might be used to address that, I guess, on Tuesday. So the international community is very keen to implement that. NASA has not signed up for that other than being part of the scenario studies, and that's actually kind of important to know. In fact, in the 2013 Global Exploration Roadmap, there actually is a sentence in there that says, we recognize that all international partners are interested in getting humans to the lunar surface with the exception of NASA. Okay. What a concept. Right? So there is a new roadmap to be released this year. It will be fascinating to see what the language is in that. Yeah. And I don't know if there is still time for people in the community to influence that language, but if you have
That's a good point.
An opportunity to discuss this with people at the headquarters level, then your perspective, one way or the other, can be expressed to them.
That's
So,
yeah.
and then for those who are interested in humans to the lunar surface, you can use that ISEG paper as a starting point, and you say, this is a design reference mission, and you can say, if that is implemented, what can or should we be doing? And that is a fair starting point because it
great.
is an ISEG-sponsored document, and NASA has signed on to that.
That's great. Thank you very much, David. I'm going to exercise my prerogative as chair and ask Jim Head to shut up. And so we'll move on to the program here, okay?
Carly's got a quick point. Just,
Yes,
It's going to
please.
be quick, right,
Oh,
Carly?
yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
You're not going to monologue us, right?
No.
Carly's the next talk, so it's coming out of her time, right?
Well, I'm all for humans to the surface of the moon in many places, but I think it's getting back to the original question, use of the gateway and moving forward. There's one aspect that I think really is a central part. Clearly, NASA's stated goal, even through multiple administration, is Mars is our horizon goal. To get humans to Mars, you've got enormous, not only technical capabilities, but you've got the whole planetary protection. Bringing a sample back from Mars is going to, people are going to be in an uproar. You know, what are we going to do with these samples that are going to create
I know what to do.
all sorts of Armageddon? So, getting back to the gateway, this concept of using the gateway as collecting multiple samples from multiple places on the moon is elegant in that once people see, yeah, astronauts are involved and people and multiple samples, it's a simple step then when we get samples from Mars, which is perhaps the next step, bringing it back to wherever the gateway is at that time will be simple. You know, it will be already cast in stone and the uproar is not going to be there. So the moon will help us.
And the moon
Okay,
always
so
helps us.
thank you very much, Clive. I appreciate it. Did you have one? So, Carly, work your way up here. So, to tell us all about the extremely exciting things that robotic and human missions can do on the moon, Carly Peters is going to talk about the moon as a touchstone for crustal evolution.